Okay, welcome everybody to Reframe webinars. This is Pricing with Confidence, the 2025 podcast and webinar series. And this episode is part 6, The Road to Rebranding Accounting. About today's session, we're going to spend about 3 minutes talking about the free webinar series, what a lot of you are attending live now, what the CPE process is. We'll talk about all the Reframe related live webinars and events for a few minutes. And then we'll go jump into today's conversation, which is the premise is let's talk about the road to rebranding, rebranding accounting, rebranding bookkeeping, rebranding tax preparation. And we'll discuss multiple topics. What is a brand? Why should we care? How should we evaluate what our current brand is? Should we worry individually about rebranding the entire profession? And what are those sort of next steps that can be taken towards this road to rebranding? Okay. All right. So about this webinar series, this is a 10 sessions titled Pricing with Confidence, same exact title we're using for our main event in November of 2025 for our big event called Pricing with Confidence. It started back in January and it will end with a 10th session on October 24th, right before the conference starts. So it's all leading up to those amazing 3 days we're going to have in Miami this year. We will send everybody copies of the slides. We'll put the slides via chat for those that want to follow the slides on their own side. And we will also email you the slides as well, so you have copies of that. We will post the recording if you want to watch and listen again in my YouTube channel. So we're going to give a 1-hour CPE certificate to attendees that answer the polling questions. The polling questions are unannounced. They will just pop 4 polling questions during the hour. And our records must show that you are logged in for at least 50 minutes in order to get that. If you haven't gotten that within 10 days, just email me and I'll have my admin team look into it. We usually just batch those a couple of days after the webinar ends. So about some upcoming events. So on July 1st, Carlos is doing a free Exactly How to Role Play Zoom session. He's been doing them every month for anyone that wants to practice having critical conversations with their clients, teammates, partners, employees, all that stuff, using the Exactly What to Say methodology to do exactly how to role play. On July 2nd, I'm doing a session called Using ChatGPT to Plan a Transformational Engagement and How to Price It. I'm deeply and heavily inspired by Ron Baker's recent work on the transformation economy, which is inspired by Joe Pine's The Transformation Economy book that's coming out next year. And this is the new way to look at how professionals reposition themselves as transformational agents or agents of transformation. So I am going to show you how I'm experimenting with ChatGPT to help me prepare a transformational conversation, help me build a transformational engagement, and then finally how to price or position that transformational engagement. On July 31st, Carlos starts the very first Exactly What to Say certification for accounting professionals, which is a virtual 4-week program. And then fast forward, we'll be spending August, September, and October preparing for our big event. Fast forward to November 2nd, we'll start our Reframe 2025 2.5-day event. And we have a bonus day 3, so to speak, which will be on November 5th. We will sell this, it's called a Rebranding Accounting with Chris Doe. We will sell this standalone and also as a combo with Reframe attendees. So we have a live early bird that ends on July 31st, where you can combine the two, and it's under $2,500 to do the entire experience. We already have 24 people signed up for that. Carlos, maybe talk to us about that rebranding for accounting session.
Yeah, so super excited that we have the opportunity to bring Chris Doe back to help us co-facilitate a very dedicated session towards helping the accounting profession rebrand itself. Because the reality is there are a lot of competing new changes that are happening that is changing the perception of what will accounting mean for the future. We know that AI taking a big role in what that's going to do in terms of understanding what our roles are going to be once a lot of tasks that accounting professionals are known to be really good at completing are going to potentially be either enhanced or replaced with AI. So, what does that mean for the profession? What does that mean for us? How do we rebrand ourselves and redefine the role that we play in better helping our customers? And branding is really all about, in the eyes of the customers, what it means. What's the meaning of accounting? And it's definitely going to be a very interesting and high value workshop because Hector and I will have the opportunity to brainstorm with Chris to bring his incredible insights and experience around how personal branding can definitely positively impact your business and help you stay ahead rather than kind of continue on forward, staying behind with the traditional ways of running your businesses. So I'm super excited about it. Some details around it is it's dedicated for accounting professionals, bookkeepers, tax preparers, looking to really build strong personal and professional brands. Hector, myself, and Chris will be co-facilitating this. And it'll be at the same venue where Reframe is happening. It'll be the day after the event. Currently, we have got 24 folks who are already attending, and we're capped at 40 participants. We're going to do it in a more smaller, intimate room. It will be workshop style. And it's on Wednesday, November 15th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Now, the price to the public is $1,000. If you're not coming to Reframe, just want to come to this standalone. And for those who are coming to Reframe and are thinking about adding this to their plans, then we have a bundle price at a preferred price of $750 as a combo. So if you're interested, the link is in the chat and we'll give you more details on it.
All right, awesome. So we were going to have Chris Do with us today. I'm not sure if he's having technical difficulties. Maybe he'll join us a little bit later. So I won't read them in or introduce him. Let's go ahead and get started, Carlos, you and I, and maybe having a discussion with the group about branding. I think this is, like, I personally think that this is the newest, most important existential question that we should have as a profession, which is, do we right now focus on branding? Do we focus on rebranding the profession? Reframe's goal is to rebrand the accounting profession to be seen as the most innovative, forward-looking, and creative of all professions. And the reason for that is because I think that many thought leaders and folks are focused on, yeah, let's help accountants provide more advisory. We got to help accountants get out of compliance, or we got to help accountants increase their prices. And I think that all those mechanisms and all those techniques, so to speak, I think they're all very important. I think we should all, become more skilled or be more specialized or charge more or aim for better clients. But I think it's a little bit more nuanced to discuss at a higher level what it means to rebrand, what it means to change the brand, what it means to completely change the perspective of how people see us. Currently, people use as a joke, what's the difference between let's say a mortician or an accountant or something like that. And then people say something like, well, when you're talking to a mortician, they're going to be looking at their shoes. But when you talk to an accountant, they'll be looking at your shoes, right? So the challenge that we have as a profession is that we have this certain brand. And I'm not talking about the brand about what we do and how we do it. I'm particularly talking about just the brand of personality. And it's going to be very difficult to position yourselves as forward-looking, as creative, as innovative, if your own personal brand individually, automatically people think of you as an accountant, a bookkeeper, a tax preparer, a CPA, whatever. They think of you, oh, it's a super introverted person, very, very risk averse, super hyper worried about the future, only thinking about the past. They're focused on being historians and historians only. So how are we going to change the perception, the perspective that people have towards the profession if the perspective they have as individuals is like that? And Carlos, you do a lot of coaching, one-on-one coaching with accountants, and every single time I react a certain way, Carlos tells me, typical accountant. Like, just because what Carlos has seen and observed from the behaviors of certain people. And even though Carlos wants to see me as one that's sort of more aware or more cognizant of this branding issue, he usually points it out. And he goes, as a very accountant of you to react or say that. Do you have any comments on that particularly?
I do, but before I do share my thoughts, we do have good news. We do have a special guest joining us very shortly. But before I do want you to type in the chat. To you, what does branding mean? Let me actually clarify that question. In the eyes of your customers, how are you perceived as an accountant when it comes to thinking about your brand, the brand of an accountant to the eyes of the regular small business owner? What would be some words to describe how you're looked at? So just kind of add in the chat from your point of view what that means. And this might be some good recon work as we have our amazing special guest joining us right now. Chris, thank you for jumping on. We had a little bit of a miscommunication in the timing, but thank you for your flexibility and for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome, Chris. So excited to have you here. I want to point out that a lot of people are, when Carlos asked the question, what is that one word or what is that brand that customers have towards, or business owners or customers have towards accountants? And everyone here is being super optimistic. Everybody here is saying all the good things, right? Reliable, trusted partner, business advisor, professional advisor, patient, cherished partner, trustworthy, knowledgeable, dependable, integrity, dependable, helpful, different, trustworthy, loyal. So there's all these positive words, which are, by the way, and only a few people are being a little bit honest, and they're saying, well, some people might perceive us as expensive, or some people might perceive us as a pain. And let me tell you, I think it's important to be aware of both. I think it's really important to aspirational think of all those incredible words that you want people to associate you with, but it might be even more valuable to be more aware of if there's, number one, if there's a perspective being changed, and if there is a duality where I trust my super knowledgeable and reliable accountant, but they're kind of a pain in the butt. They're kind of demanding. They're very conservative. They ask for a lot of stuff, or they take forever. You know what I mean? So I think it's really important to do that. So Chris, maybe I'll start with you. Any comments on that? Or we can go straight to the question of, like, what exactly is a brand supposed to be?
Well, I have a lot of respect for accountants, but I don't look at them the same way that you might look at yourselves. I look at accountants mostly as necessary for my business, and very honest and clear, but also not super creative. Not someone that I look to talk about big ideas. They're more backwards looking than they are forward looking, so they're conservative. And I was looking up this word, maybe they're pedantic, like overly concerned with very small details. And as a CEO, my mind melts when I look at too many numbers. I need to know just enough, but not that much. And so those are some of the words I think about.
Carlos,
Yeah,
I'll let you jump in.
yeah. What I would say is, it's funny how when I frame the question, how do customers see you as an accountant? And Hector, to your point, you said, like they're looking at it all in the positive frame. But my experience says otherwise, because most people that do want to work with me is really to help them kind of elevate that mindset, give them the confidence to be able to price at a higher level, give them some guidance around how to position themselves as a high value professional. But whenever we have these very difficult, like very real conversations around, but when I communicate my price, they say words like, but it's just bookkeeping, but it's just a tax return. And so I want you to transport yourself to that moment when a client doesn't perceive you as someone who's bringing valuable results, outcomes, or feelings. Because if we remember from some past conversations, the definition of selling, what we're really selling is not just the service, because that's the way the clients are currently perceiving it, as just a service or just a deliverable. what we want to really sell is either a feeling or an outcome. So with that in mind, Chris, why is it, and I think in designer world, I think folks struggle with this too, right? Because designers, when they want to try to sell a logo and they say it's just a logo, what would you add to that perspective around what's our role to control that perception?
To control that when people say you're just something?
Well, it's their perception of your brand is you're just maybe a commodity, or it's just a service, or it's just a deliverable. What is the role that we can play in shifting that perspective when it comes to branding?
Whenever I hear the word just, it's to diminish whatever comes after. It's just to the market. It's just across town. And I think sometimes people use this unintentionally, and maybe it reflects a subconscious impression that they have that this is not something I value. This is not something I need. It's necessary, but it's not something I look forward to doing. It's just like a visit to the dentist. It's not something I want to do. I need to do it. And so there's a challenge of perception and one of value. And I'm not saying this, I want to be clear about this. Not all accountants are created equally. Some will do your books. Some will make sure that your books are reconciled. Some will actually help you plan for the future. Some will let you know how you're doing your business and to give you the guts to make big, bold decisions. But not all of them are created equally. So each and every single person on this call probably is not going to fit in one category or the other. You're going to run across the spectrum. So you have to take a hard look at yourself and say, how am I different? How do I create value? And how do I move myself beyond this perception that clients may already have? Like when you talk about graphic design, not everyone knows what that is. But I think when you talk about accounting, almost everyone kind of has an idea of what it is. And so we have to work against this perceived image of what we think of accountants. And it could be good, it could be bad, but we need to do more than just accept it for what it is.
Like there was just something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I wanted to read in Chris because he jumped in and it wasn't sure, the timing that he was coming in. So Chris Doe is actually not an accountant, not a thought leader in the accounting industry. Chris Doe he calls himself a recovering graphic designer. So he made a living doing graphic designer and motion graphics and that sort of thing. But he's an award-winning designer, keynote speaker in all major industry conferences. He's the host of an amazing webinar series called Client Acquisition Machine, which is really geared towards the graphic designers, the creatives. But I guarantee you that you attend that webinar and it'll completely change your perspective about how content drives clients. So I strongly recommend that. All the links are in the slides that you have access to. For those that attended Reframe 2024, you must have gotten a signed copy of A Pocket Full of Dough, awesome book that Chris wrote a couple of years ago. YouTube channel, 2.7 million subscribers. No one surprises that. Incredible content. Instagram, almost 1 million subscribers. Chris will throw a 1 million subscriber party at Reframe, I think. LinkedIn, which is really impressive because it's hard to get followers in LinkedIn, 589,000. The Future podcast and founder of the Future Pro community, which highly inspired the Reframe Society community that Carlos and I created. We're both members of the Future Pro community, and Chris, we get inspired by a lot of ideas on how do you run that community for us to run ours. And the last thing I want to say is, for those that came to Reframe 2024, you're intimately aware of what Chris Doe is. He said something on stage, which I think came up with at the moment, during the Reframe 2024 event, that I saw half the conference write it down in their notes, which is the more you are, the more you are, within the context of how important is the authenticity for you to be who you really are as part of your brand. So Chris, sorry, I had to, show in that introduction in it. And I want to transition about the question about what is a brand to the fact that a lot of us bookkeepers, accountants, tax preparers, we're super busy. And sometimes we even mistake branding with marketing, with advertising, with promoting ourselves, with social media. I think we lump all those as one thing. And then because we're so busy, we kind of say, okay, we don't have time to that one thing. And I'm here saying that branding is the most existential question for the profession. This is one thing that we need to work. It is the ethos of Reframe, is why we are doing what we're doing. Chris, why should we care? We're too busy right now, but why should we care?
Well, I think if you're too busy counting all the profitable accounts that you have and moving towards the future as you're growing exponentially, you don't need to care at all. And if that's the case, you're probably not even on this webinar to begin with. And I think it's one thing to say, I'm busy and I don't have any free time, but then it's to make the assumption that everyone else must not be busy or something. We're all busy. We all have things competing for our attention and our time. And if you spend all your time working in your business, then you're not working on your business at all. And this is the classic mistake that most entrepreneurs make, which is when they're busy, they don't think about sales, marketing, lead generation, thought leadership. And then when things slow down or when the market shifts, and the market is shifting really fast in almost every industry you can think of because of the looming threat of artificial intelligence. And it's not looming anymore because every single day a new app is developed that makes doing what you do a little easier and slightly unnecessary. And I want to point out something, and this is something that's been going on for some time. We have shifted from the age of character to the age of personality. It used to be in a time and a place where people cared about the character, like what you meant. Now it's more about personality, how you make me feel. And especially as we're, I guess, living in industrialized countries where there's a plentiful supply of food, where our relative safety and shelter is accounted for, we're moving way more towards identity. And when I buy something, what does that say about me? Who am I? And so this is something you need to be very aware of. This is why the word branding and now more, I guess, more narrowed down to the single person, personal branding has become such a term that people are investigating right now. Now, I met with Dan Martell, and I love to tell this story, recently in Austin, and we're having this like power creator, thought leader dinner. And it was myself, Dan Martell, Ryan Dice, and Daniel Priestley. We're sitting there at the table and we're talking, we're sharing stories. And then somebody had said, do you know how many leads Alex Hormozi gets a day? And we're all like looking at each other like, no. And they said 500 qualified leads. And this is when Dan Martell, he's the founder of SaaS Academy, he says something like, I was really reluctant about creating a personal brand. He had already exited out of multiple startups. He's done really well for himself, flies in his own private jet. He calls up Hormozi, who's a buddy, and says, you know what, convince me. Why do I need to do this at all? And I find it funny, ironic, because Hormozi was the one who was on stage a few years ago saying, I'd rather be rich than famous. This personal brand thing is silly. Only then to say he started to wonder why people like Kylie Jenner were worth $1 billion and he wasn't. And he's like, I'm late to this game. So as you know, Hormozi's been hard at work building his personal brand. He spends upwards of $90,000 to $100,000 a month himself just on his content team, and it's doing something for him. So Martell meets with him, talks to him, and then he realizes he needs to get on this. So about a year and a half ago, he starts going all in on this, and he's blown up his account to pass 1 million followers. And he said the conclusion to all of this is he said that brand is a force multiplier. It takes everything that you do and it scales it exponentially. It makes getting clients easier. It makes retaining talent easier. It makes recruiting top tier talent easier. It makes book publishers look for you versus you chasing them. It gets you public speaking opportunities. It allows for collaborations. Everything is easier. And he says, the one regret that I have is I did not do this sooner. Now, this is coming from a guy who reportedly does $1 million a week in revenue. And he's telling you in his private jet, the thing he wished he did sooner was to build his personal brand, and that brand, personal brand, is a force multiplier. You don't have to take it from me. You don't have to believe Martell. You don't have to believe Hormozi, but just look around the world right now. There's a woman who started a soft drink company that has like, what is it called? Apple cider vinegar in it. I think it's called Poppy, and was sold to one of the big cola companies for $1 billion. A self-made person in less than 10 years, I believe, took a know-nothing idea and sold it for $1 billion. I know accountants are very good at numbers. Those are hard to ignore numbers. I don't want you to do this because you want to make a gazillion $billion. That's a byproduct of the goodness that you do in the world. But to be asleep at this time and say, well, it doesn't matter, that's your choice. I respect your choice, but I don't advise it. That's why brand matters.
And Chris, you're describing a bunch of successful people that get a bunch of leads that are very busy, right? They're very busy. They have a lot of work, and we see like we currently you're illustrating this as a good thing, right? That they have a lot of customers to choose from, a lot of leads to choose from. They have a lot of work. They probably make a lot of money. A lot of accountants right now are very busy, and a lot of this stuff comes from a lot of uh, word of mouth type of referral. So they're very, very busy. Um, don't you think that the tide could turn where being busy becomes a negative brand for us?
It depends on what kind of busy. I mean, busy doing meaningful work where you're commanding a premium valued by your clients. First person they call when they need big business advice and visionary planning. I think that's great busy work. Busy work servicing low end projects with low margins where people don't think of you at all and they just think of you as a nuisance. They pay your bills, but they don't do much beyond that. That's up to you. I see there's comments in here, people saying, I'm happy with the word of mouth advertising I'm getting. And I think that is a certain kind of mindset. And, you know, there's this book. I haven't read it yet, but somebody recommended it to me. I think it's called The Jewish Way or The Jewish Mindset, where Jewish people represent a very small percentage of the population, yet they are the highest percentage of millionaires and the highest percentage of like found tech founders. And there's something that I was just reading on the book jacket. I promise you I haven't gotten that deep, but they said they think about intergenerational wealth, not just like what my kids will have, but 2 generations from now, what will they have? And I know all of you work hard for a bigger purpose. It could be to take care of your parents. It could be to take care of your family, but it also could be to give back to the communities that you serve. It could be that. And I keep thinking about that. It's like, if you're happy being a good sized local business and servicing your clients that way, fine. This, what I'm talking about will not really appeal to you at all. But when you're talking about leaving an imprint on the world, like the dent in the universe that you want to make sure that you leave this place a little bit better than you found it, to make sure that you're creating something that lives beyond you, then you need to think about this. Okay. And if you are for that, then I'm here to talk about that. I'm not really here to convince the people who are not convinced, because that's your own prerogative. It's like you could tell me, Chris, accounting is the most important thing in the universe. If I don't agree with that, I don't think you're going to use your energy well trying to convince me. I'm for the people who are on the fence, who are already charging in here, as both of you have, in developing your own personal brands across the different platforms in which you publish on, to help you go to the next level. Because I've spent the last 10 years working on this, thinking about it, writing about it, talking about it, running workshops on this, and I have a very distinct and sometimes contrarian point of view on how to build a personal brand.
Yeah. I would say my take on this is it's a little bit contradictory, right? Because on one side, there's this concept or thought process where it's like, oh, I'm too busy, I'm happy where I am right now. And typically when we are content and we're not self-disrupting, and all of the sudden AI comes to disrupt our situation, now we're sort of running around like a chicken with our heads cut off. And this is a recent development. And Chris, just for you know, in the industry and for everyone to know, there are apps out there that exist now, right now, that serve as AI agents to do tax prep work. And this is going to be the new disruption that is going to change the game in accounting. What does this mean? Literally, it's going to replace all your junior tax preparers. That is a huge disruption. And that's going to take everyone out on a new journey on redefining, how do I now create value when I know this new thing that we're going to have is going to be a new customer expectation to get my, once I upload my documents, that AI is going to be able to interpret what documents those are. And it's going to be able to integrate directly to a tax software. And it's going to be able to basically eliminate all of this manual work. What does that define with that extra time that I now have, which no longer is going to create a perception where my accountant is always busy, because now it's created all of this additional time. What could we do that? And that's where I think branding could be rebranding is a good opportunity for us to redefine how we create value for our clients. Because especially all these automated softwares and all these online, non-personal, non-one-to-one services, that could be a new competitor that could be replacing that small boutique accounting service. And so this is where I think branding can become relevant, and we have the opportunity to redefine how we add value to our clients. The second thing that I want to add, Chris, is that although a lot of us are saying, oh, I'm very content with where I have, but the reality is that 9 out of 10 conversations that I have with accounting professionals is like, I took on this client from 10 years ago and I'm still charging them the same that I was charging them 10 years ago. And I'm afraid to raise my price. Or, I know I can charge them more because the work that I'm going to do, it is more, the scope calls for it, but I'm afraid that they're going to think that, it's not valuable. And so I think branding can play a role in us also changing that perception of how they see, the work that we provide to these clients. So any fast feedback on that or thoughts?
There was a comment here about word of mouth and getting referrals, and it takes time to build. Another way of thinking about brand building is word of mouth at scales that transcend borders and time zones, nationalities, or even ethnicities. It's the most beautiful thing. It's like when you build your personal brand or your brand, your reputation precedes you. That's like that expression, good day to meet you, sir. Your reputation precedes you. What are we talking about? Well, your reputation has moved beyond your circle or your second tier circle. And it's really interesting what happens then. When there's this thing I love to talk about. If you've been to any of my CAM workshops, it's this idea of confidence. We'd all like to be more confident in our business, in our practice, in our decision making, in our relationships, how we carry ourselves. And I love what David C. Baker writes about this in The Business of Expertise. He writes that as far as he can tell, confidence equals, this is a formula he has, when opportunities exceed capacity. So he says, take the number of opportunities you have and divide it by capacity. So when you're starting out or wherever you are in your business, whether it's mature or new, if you have 100 opportunities, 100 leads of qualified clients, and if you have the capacity to serve 25 of them, your confidence score would be 4. 100 divided by 25 would be 4. Conversely, if you have 25 leads or opportunities and you have the capacity to do 25, your confidence score would be 1. Now, if we go all the way to the opposite side, which is you have 5 opportunities and leads and you have the capacity to do 25 or take on 25 clients, that is now 1/5. You'd be at 20%. So then your confidence is really low. What happens when your confidence is low versus high? When it's low, you become a little bit desperate, maybe needy. You'll agree to terms and conditions that you don't love or like. You'll take on clients that you don't believe in, doing work that you don't prefer. You will be more likely to take on a work last minute. Maybe you're willing to do free work, that you're willing to do assessments and things of that nature because you need the work so badly. And if you flip on the other side, if you have a wait list of qualified clients to work with you, what naturally happens is because of a supply-demand cycle here, is you'll probably ask for more money. You'll say, to work with me, it's going to cost more. I only work with certain types of clients in this vertical, with entrepreneurs who are forward-thinking, who think that accounting and understanding the numbers is a vital part of their business. And you could be way more selective. You can hire better teams to work with you, and you could take a little bit of time off. There's a lot of things that happen when there's greater demand than there's supply of you. So if you believe in word of mouth, think of personal branding and branding as word of mouth done at scale. And it's awesome once it starts. It's like one of these things where if the momentum gets rolling, it catches like wildfire. I have to be careful with terms like that because California is a dry place. We don't talk about fires here, but it catches. And it's an amazing thing once it happens for you. Now, will it happen for everybody? Truth is, no, it won't. Because not everybody can do it. Not everyone's committed. And not everyone has that X factor. But it's worth pursuing.
Yeah, 100%. I wanted to go back and to talk about the concept we were talking about, busy, being busy doing meaningful work. I think right now we're all very busy, but most people, if you were to evaluate what you're busy on, it's probably highly likely that if you were to evaluate the level of meaningfulness of your work in terms of how customers see it, whether they see it as transformative or not, it might be on the lower scale. So I think it's good to be busy, but busy doing the more meaningful work. And this transition to AI might be what helps us do that. Like I think that anything AI can do, if it could do it similar to what you do now, I think by definition stops being meaningful. I think the way to rate whether work is meaningful or not is if AI cannot do it. And I know a lot of people are looking at AI right now and they're saying, you know what? In my lifetime, AI will never be reliable or AI will never be accurate. And I'm going to tell you, if you think that way, I'm going to tell you, I only agree with you if we both have the same definition of the word reliable or accurate. And I think that if you actually go back to the discussions you've had with your clients about what reliability or accuracy means, even you don't have the same opinion that your clients have about that. You ask other accountants, what's accurate, what's inaccurate. You have two accountants prepare financial statements with the exact same information, and you're going to get different numbers. It might be close. It might be an immaterial change. But the point is that for our clients, from our client's perspective, reliability and accuracy might be a whole different animal in terms of just the perspective. And there is a concept that I think is going to come to us, and it's going to come really, really quickly, which is the concept of good enough. Our customers at some point will look at AI work and they're going to say, good enough. And we're going to have difference in opinion. And we are going to fight to the end of the day, to try to change their mind about what good enough is. And we won't be able to do it because it's going to be a lot of the reality of what AI can do versus the narrative of what AI can do. And I think the tech companies are more worried about the narrative of AI versus what it actually does. This is why so many software companies start throwing AI like nothing, like this is going to get automated and AI will do this and AI will do that. And we actually look at it, it's not even AI, it's just pattern recognition, or it's the exact same thing that they've been doing for a long time, but now they're calling it AI because they're hopping in the AI train. And I think that reality causes us, the professionals, to have a lot of skepticism. So Chris, no surprise, 99% of accountants are looking at AI and say, that's a gimmick. That's not going to get anywhere. That's never going to do it accurate, or it's always going to be messed up and we're going to have to clean it. But I think the reality is that the narrative will win. And the only way to combat narrative is with counter narrative. And the counter narrative of accounting is going to be our brand, is what we represent. We don't represent accuracy in numbers anymore. We don't represent reliability in numbers anymore. That's something that machines do. Machines have taken over that, and that's okay. And we need to be confident and comfortable that we have ceded ground to machines to be doing that work. And yes, it will take a long time for it to be accurate, or as accurate as us, or as accurate as it would be if someone with real judgment and experience were to apply it. But we have to be one step ahead and reposition us as those that have also transcended AI. We cannot fight AI for relevancy. We have to transcend it and be one step ahead of that. And Chris, I would love to know from your world, graphic designers and people in your world, are they seeing it the same way?
I think all great change like this comes with a degree of fear and skepticism. And the first thing you do is you deny its existence, and then you rationalize it's not good enough. But I think, unfortunately, for a lot of people, this wave of change is going to wipe out most people. And you can say like AI is a gimmick, it's a thing, it won't be here to stay. But then you would also be in that camp of people who said the internet is a gimmick, it's not here to stay. You'd also be in the group of people who had said that social media is stupid, it's a gimmick, it's not here to stay. And it's one of these things, like we talk about the adoption curve, like the early adopters, the first movers. You don't want to be the laggard. You don't even want to be the middle adopter or the late adopter. And unfortunately, the stereotype that exists with accountants is fairly conservative and rigid in thinking might be the thing that undoes a lot of you. It's worthwhile for you to see the opportunities that exist and to realize that, yes, we all have a lot of work to do, and no one needs another thing to do. But this might be the thing that gets you into the next 20, 50 years of your business, and instead of just surviving, helps you to thrive. But that's
Great.
up to you. I don't know why we're spending so much time convincing people of inevitability. It's like saying the internet's not going to be a thing. I'd like to talk about something fun if that's possible.
Yeah, I wanted to transition, Chris, because I know that you've been on tour talking about this new workshop that you've introduced called Unbland Yourself. And I'm sure there's a lot of insights and a lot of good discussions that's come out of it in helping people just kind of transform not only just their mindset, but their approach towards looking at personal branding. So I guess a question to prompt you here is if we were to look at ourselves internally to evaluate what our current brand looks like, whether it's our business brand or our personal brand, what would be the kind of first step towards that?
Okay. I'd love to have some common definitions before we begin. I know it's a nerdy thing to do. A lot of people don't understand what brand is. Brand, for a lot of people, it's the logo, the colors, and typefaces. Those are very important parts of the brand, and we'll explain later if we have time. But brand, and I go to Marty Neumeyer's definition, is a person's gut feeling about a person, a business, organization. So it's a feeling, and Jeff Bezos will say something like brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. So there's some sense of this. It's a reputation, it's a feeling. There's lots of things that are involved in this, but it's kind of an impression. And so branding then is impression management. And the art of branding is to create meaningful differentiation. How are you different in a way that's meaningful? Because we can have orange hair, we can have a purple skin, but that's different, but not really meaningful. And so now we get into art and craft of this. And a lot of this is built around design. I don't mean design in just pure aesthetics, but aesthetics are a big part of it. When we are able to stand apart from the competition, we make it a little bit easier for people to pick us. Michael Margolis talks about this in his book, Story 10X. He says a product or service without a story is a commodity. So part of brand building and building your personal brand is about learning how to be different and how to tell that story in effective ways with a lot of intentionality. So if we go to the supermarket, I remember growing up, I'm in my 50s, early 50s here. So I remember going to the supermarket growing up poor, and they had store brands. And I don't know if y'all remember, but they had this generic yellow brand. And it was just like the other brands, but not as good, but a lot cheaper. And it came in yellow packaging, and it had Helvetica as a typeset. So it would just say white bread instead of Wonder Bread or whatever bread you like. It would say salt instead of Morton salt. And you would buy that because that was the house brand. And the house brand was never perceived as good as the other thing. And when you would buy it, you would taste and feel the difference. And I don't think it's pure perception. The toothpaste wouldn't be as nice. The bread wouldn't be as fluffy. It's all those things. And it's because companies spend a lot of time making a really high quality product, telling you the differences of that. And they do that around their brand to protect their brand from being copied. And they do this. And this is the history of the last couple hundred years here. Okay. So when we're talking about your personal brand versus your corporate brand, there's a very clear distinction here. I don't want to talk about corporate brands at all because they're boring to me. Most of us don't spend any time understanding it, won't invest in it. But the thing that we can invest in is our personal brand. And it turns out your personal brand, whether you're the leader of a 5-person company or a Fortune 500 company, matters a lot. And if you look at social as one point of reference, one data set, is to say like Tim Cook has way more followers than Apple. Elon Musk has way more followers than Tesla, to his own detriment at this point. And you'll see the reason why is, to quote my friend Yolanda Santosa, she says that people do not fall in love with corporations. Corporations are made up things anyways. They fall in love with personalities. This is great because you have a personality. That's why it's called personal brand. So who are you? What do you stand for? What do you believe in? What are you against? What are you trying to rid the world of? And if people support you, what are they joining? What kind of tribe? Because we buy in tribes for safety. This is really important, okay? So when I can choose any accountant, any auto detailing place, any web designer developer, why do I pick one versus the other? Ana Lape says this, every dollar you spend is a vote for the world that you want. So when I choose your brand of accounting, your brand of leadership, your brand of coaching, I want more of you to exist and less of your competition exists. That's why people are sometimes Chevy people and Ford people. That's why people are Apple people and Microsoft people, and it goes down the line because we're all trying to win this war, and the brand with the strongest tribe wins, period. Now, you can't enroll people into your mission, your vision, and your values if you don't know what they stand for. What are people joining? Why are they voting for you to exist? If you don't give them a reason, they just pay the lowest price. We've all done this. When you're just thirsty, you'll buy whatever random bottle of water if you're really thirsty. If you care, you'll buy a specific brand of water and you pay a premium 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5x of the cheaper alternative. That's the power of brand.
I love that. Chris, one of the things that I learned going to your personal branding workshop a few years back is this idea of, kind of leaning in to your personality and being able to clearly define who you are, kind of greater connection with yourself. And I know you go over this idea of like Carl Jung, who has this philosophy or this theory about a shadow self, and then the self that shows up like that we want people to see, right? Which is kind of like that artificial layer about like, when I'm in Facebook and kind of like the Instagram, the common Instagram thing, right? A highlight reel. Everybody gets to see all the good things that are happening, but that vulnerable side of us, we try to hide it because it might seem like a weakness. But your take on this is, how do we lean into the vulnerability side to continue to show up more authentic, and then having a more deeper connection with others? Um, what could you share around that concept that helps really fuel the authenticity behind a personal brand?
Yeah, there's this word authenticity. It's used a lot, and it's a weird thing that we're even talking about being authentic. But I think in Western culture, society, we've been socialized to do certain things. We've learned at an early age we go along to get along, and no one wants to be ostracized, especially in those formative years when we still don't know who we are. We're very vulnerable at that stage. So whatever the group is wearing, saying, and thinking, we participate in that because we don't want to be the leper in that. Unfortunately, though, some of it comes at a cost to all of us, which is the subjugation of oneself, our true identity. If you like pink as a young person and everyone else likes blue, for an example, you will say, "Ma, I don't like pink anymore. That's stupid." And you start to bury that. And I have a theory in that when you pretend to be somebody for long enough, you forget who you really are. And the mind doesn't really know the difference between real and unreal. The body does, but the mind doesn't. So for example, you notice how when there's an on-set romance between famous actors, that they actually do fall in love because they were pretending to be in love for the role, and then the mind doesn't know the difference. And the same is true when you pretend to be somebody you're not for long enough, you forget who the real you is. And this is why we go through coaching, consulting, and therapy. We do deep inner work to figure out who the heck we are. So we show up and Young talks about this, we show up using the persona, the person we show up in the world to be accepted, to be loved, and at least not to be ridiculed. And there's other part to us, the parts that makes us different, unique, and memorable, all the things you need for personal branding. Excuse me. We bury, and that's referred to as the shadow self. It's not until these two components can come back into unity, in harmony, that we are whole, we are complete. And it's something that I try to help people figure out. So there's this classic symbol, which almost everyone knows about. It's called the yin yang symbol, which is the equal and opposite, right? There's this white black thing, and they're counterbalanced, and it's perfect. It's a very Eastern idea. But when we look at anything and we say, like, every good thing has a bad side to it, and every bad thing has a good side to it, that there's no such thing as something that's purely good nor purely bad. We start to heal. We start to figure this stuff out. And it turns out, when we take it back to this whole personal branding thing, it's meaningful differentiation. So you can't be different by doing what everyone else is doing. You can't be different by saying what everyone is saying. So the key part to all of this, how are you different? What are all the weird, quirky things that make you you? And we have to lean into that. Thank you very much. It could be your voice. It could be your backstory. It could just be you have a funny or an interesting way of doing accounting or talking to people about business, or maybe you have an artistic bent to it. Um, what is it? Author Austin Kleon talks about this. Austin Kleon, who wrote the book Steal Like an Artist and Show Your Work, he says, shoot, I'm spacing right now. The symbol is so powerful, Hector. It's like I'm overwhelmed by the symbol here. He describes himself as a writer who draws. And just adding that one factor, that one dimension, makes him different than all writers. And if you enjoy his books, they're best-selling books. If you go through his books, you're like, wow, this is super cool. It's very visual, and it's written for people to read really quickly, but they can contain profound pieces of wisdom, I think. And it's kind of interesting. So if you're an accountant who draws, or if you're an accountant who does sock puppets or shadow puppetry, those are things that we would have normally hidden from view. But I'm encouraging all of you to figure out all the little parts of you that are weird, that are eccentric, that are things that you've suppressed for a really long time, to see where the overlap of all that stuff is and bring it to the surface so that you can embrace your whole self. Speaking about myself personally, I used to make commercials and music videos for a living. I also taught, and I would also consult and advise people on how to run their business. These are three separate identities. And it wasn't until I was able to get onto social and combine all three together that I found my truest self. And I found my secret or superpower. And I was reading in Marty Neumeier's book, I think it was The Brand Gap. He says that if you look at talent or the word latent and you switch the T and the L, talent becomes latent. So what is your latent or talent or your superpower? It's hidden right there in plain sight. So that's what we want to do. We want to find that and we want to elevate that.
So
Really?
Chris, incredible. So Chris, I wanted to ask you, let's assume that I buy into your idea. The idea is
Okay.
that I spent a lot of years building my corporate brand, right? Like I have my, Garcia bookkeeping business, and I have my slogan, and I have my website, and I have all my YouTube, my social media posts, et cetera. And I'm seeing some traction, but the traction that you are telling us that you're going to get a multiplier of is on a journey of personal rebrand. And I know you teach full day courses about this, and it's very difficult in 10 minutes or less do that. But what are like first step actions that people can take walking out of this conversation towards that road to rebranding?
Okay. I would argue, I'm not that familiar with Garcia bookkeeping or accounting practices, but you spent years building a corporate identity, perhaps not a corporate brand. Because until you put yourself out there and you start to tell your story and you have a point of view and you've identified your enemies and you have a clear mission and a voice with a tone that's predictable. See, so here's how we know. Here's the first test. If we said that Garcia Accounting was to start something different, a different business, could we predict what that business was going to do, what it was about? If we can't, then we're not sure that what the personality and the vibe is, right? And so the easy test, and you guys have done this in your workshops, I've seen you, where you do the brand swap, right? So if we're Hilton, if Hilton makes a shoe, what does that shoe look like? Who are the athletes? What is the ad campaign? If Hilton were to start a restaurant, maybe that's too close to home, but let's try Hilton were to start some other kind of company, a tech company, not just a shoe or apparel company, what would it do? So until you know what that is, there's a predictability part to it, this meaningful differentiation, you don't have much of a brand. So what we can do is we can look at a lot of the things that you all do and find points of differentiation that you think are important and start to say, like, I'm gonna go all in on that. I'll give you the classic example. This is very simple. And we talk about packaging a lot, okay? And this is a very simple exercise that most of you can do. And if we're able to do this in a workshop, I'd love to do this, is for each and every single one of you to go out to a supermarket, like usually a high-end supermarket, like a Whole Foods or an Erewhon or a Dean and DeLuca, and just find something that you think, this is amazing. I just love everything about this. And there's a feeling, there's an intangible thing that you're like, this is so good. The material, the design, the graphics, the visual language, the colors, the shape of the bottle or the box itself, not necessarily the product inside of all that. Like if it's a jam, doesn't even matter if the jam is good or not, but the packaging, because the packaging in theory communicates to us what the inside is all about. So when you buy an expensive, like double black label of liquor, it looks expensive because it is expensive, and it is expensive because it looks expensive. Imagine if they gave you a plain bottle and a paper bag. You're like, I'm not paying $500 for this, nor could I give it to my client who I value. And he or she's going to say to me, what, you just had time to hit the liquor store? What is going on here with you? And so packaging matters a lot. And so packaging can be broken down to lots of different things: look and feel, tone and voice, the actual words that are on the bottle itself or the package. And this is where we start to communicate personality. This is really important. If you look at Apple's packaging, it says a lot about Apple as a company. It's minimal, it's using premium materials, and every single thing has been thought out from beginning to end. There's nothing screaming at you. It's the world's most beautiful product photography. And you can't even sometimes tell what's in the box because there's so little information on it. If we go all the way to the other side, I've been in China before, and you go to a Chinese electronics store, you're overwhelmed with data points, facts, and figures and features. And it's from top to bottom, wall to wall graphics. It's screaming at you saying, please buy me. I'm worthy of your attention. If you hold the two packages up, you're like, one is confidence, one says, meh, maybe, maybe not. The other one, please, please, I need you. You can tell. One's going to cost you more. One's going to be of higher quality, perceived higher quality. Things that Rory Sutherland talks about all the time, these intangible benefits, right? And we compare the two. So if you want to get started in this thing, you have to ask yourself some really hard questions. What makes me different? What am I willing to celebrate that's going to separate me from the pack? Figure out your tone of voice. This is really, really critical. Tone of voice, if you were to write down 3 words that were visual that describe personality, that will help you figure this thing out. So make a note to yourself right now. What are 3 words that describe my personality? And the words need to be visual. Can I sense it? Can I feel that? I was talking to an amazing copywriter, I'm forgetting his name right now, and he was working with a brand, and he's like, we figured out the tone of voice. They said something like, we're witty, we're direct, and I forget the last one, we're well-traveled or worldly. That's what he says, right? So we're worldly, we're witty, and we're direct. And so the tone of voice he wrote, which was beautiful, he said something like, we pack lightly. I thought that was brilliant. So everything that they write comes from this tone of voice, like, we pack lightly. It's like, we pack lightly because we've been here before. And it tells you that we travel a lot. And so he gave me an example of how they would write normal copy and then filter through this, we pack lightly. It was a totally different voice. And now it becomes predictable. And this is important. With a strong brand, with a strong personality, you can predict what they're going to do. That's really important.
Chris, we do have an audience question here that I absolutely love, particularly because it is part of your slogan, which is, how do us left brain people connect with right brain creatives to help us implement?
Okay. I know we only have a few minutes left.
A big question for 2 minutes.
Okay. And I used to say this. I wrote a line. It says, helping left brainers think right. Right? So there's a play on words there. Now, left brainers are very good at logic, and for the 20th century ruled the world. And they're the ones who commanded all the money, who ran the companies, and we're shifting towards like a more creative world. And so now you have to start to exercise these muscles. Now, I think step number 1 is to learn that you're also a right brainer yourself. It's just been so deeply suppressed inside that brain of that big, beautiful brain of yours. So the funny thing is, whenever I give left brainers creative exercises to play, they're more excited than my creative friends are. Because they're like, oh, another exercise. But the left brainers are like so excited, like, oh, I can write copy, I can do this. It's like, my friend says this, what I like to do is I like to give people their crowns back. Like somebody took your crowns away. They told you you can't color anymore. And I want to give you back your toys and you can play. So once you ignite that part inside of you, I think you'll be more attuned to working with creatives to help you bring your vision forward. It's kind of like how if you work with a business person who's just like, I don't want to talk about numbers, it's really hard to work with them, because what you want to do is empower them with the numbers because they need those numbers to move forward. So if you're going to work with creative people, I need you to activate that part inside your brain. So they're not just going to tell you, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and you won't know if it's good or bad. You won't know if it's aligned with you. And I want some of that vision to come from you so that they just help to bring it to the surface and to produce it, not to create it for you, but to create it with you. And that's the difference there.
And to conclude it, I want to say, Chris, I believe that the word creative was taken away from us. I don't know who they is. I don't know who took it. I don't know why it happened. But what happened was, at some point during our careers, the concept of creative accounting has been connected with something negative, right? With something illegal or something unethical. Therefore, our immediate reaction to the word creativity is that is the farthest away from what I am and what I represent. And in a post AI world where just simply having knowledge is not really an edge, because people will find access to that knowledge so quickly within a click. And what you say all the time, it's like AI will never replicate taste, right? And what I think when you say that to creatives, you say, don't worry, AI will never replicate taste, or your taste is the most important thing because that's what people will gravitate towards. I think that in the contrast for accounting is going to be our ability to apply good judgment, or our ability to apply a creative point of view to what seems to be a problem that we have always fixed just in one way. So, Chris, if you want to say something to close it, I'll let you. If not, I'll wrap it up.
I don't have much more to add to this. I think there's this quote from Nobel laureate. I'm spacing on this name right now, but Marty references him, and he says you have to design if you want to be innovative. And design, in the broader definition of design, is to devise a course of action from an existing to preferred condition. And maybe we don't all think of ourselves as creatives, but we're all designers, because when you're moving from an existing to preferred, the way things are to the way things should be, you're definitely a designer. And I consider all designers creative, so I want you to think of it like that.
Amazing. Chris, thank you very much for being here. We're super excited to have you at Reframe for the third time, a conference that used to have a very long name written by an accountant that now has a really short, modern, and cool name, highly aided by your help. So the word Reframe really came from Chris brainstorming with us how to rename our conference and give it a little bit more meaning. So we're particularly excited to have you for a full day. So we don't have to jank you off a stage because you went an hour long or whatever, like has happened in the last couple of years. We're going to have a full day with you. You're going to be able to think through your answers. You're going to be able to give a small group really, really actionable advice about the journey for all of us to individually rebrand ourselves so we can collectively rebrand the value that people perceive from the work that we do. So thank you very much, Chris. We're excited to see everybody at Reframe, Pricing with Confidence. We're going to have Ron Baker, Trisha Browers, Blair Enns, myself, Carlos, Chris on day 3. It's at the Lowe's Hotel in Coral Gables. We got 25 tickets left to sell out. I'll see you in November, Reframe 2025. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Carlos.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.